Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest on the show today, David Martin from David Martin's World. You can see him up on the top right there. He has a Facebook presence, Fully Live World. I'll leave you links to that. It just doesn't seem to be coming up here. But we're now at his official website, The Wobble Effect, putting humanity back into humans and business. David is known as a corporate alchemist, an entrepreneur, a financier, a storyteller, a professor, an inventor, and an author. And his new book is right above his right shoulder there. What is it? Lizards Eat Butterflies. You want to talk about that? And welcome to
Lizards
the
eat
show.
butterflies.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Lovely to be here.
Well, talk about your book first. What is the book about? And more importantly, what are you about, David?
Well, actually, the book and me get to be answered in the same sentence. The fact is that over the past 30 years or so, I've been amazed at how many something less than. You know, we hear people say, "Oh, he's only human," when it comes to describing something that maybe shouldn't have been done or couldn't have been done. And it's time to change that story, but the only way we change that story is to actually tell new stories. We need to reclaim the notion that humanity is a beautiful, wonderful, magical, amazing thing, that we are not deficient and broken, that we are not in need of perpetual assistance. And so Lizards Eat Butterflies is a book specifically referred to as an antidote to the self-help addiction. And that second piece is very important, because what I'm talking about in the book and what I'm taking on both in the book and with my life is the fact that we suffer as humanity from listening to stories that are not our own, living on stages not of our own creation, following a script that we didn't have anything to do with writing, and then wondering why life isn't working out for us. And what Lizards Eat Butterflies is about recognition that lizards are a beautiful metaphor, because when life doesn't quite fit them anymore, they shed their skin and they reemerge still a lizard, only shiny and sleek and beautiful. And rather than floating away on a wind and over-consuming as a caterpillar, I think that the metaphor of the lizard is a beautiful way to think of the way life treats us and the way we should treat life. Every now and then, the skin doesn't fit anymore. We need to shed that skin, but emerge as us, only shinier and better. So Lizards Eat Butterflies is an homage to what you can do when you decide to take control of your life.
Excellent. And I am living proof that any human out there can take control of their life and change everything for the better. And many of my people on my channel know about my past, my history, and my story. And I believe that it is this technocracy that we're living in that is keeping people depressed, sick, disillusioned, and embroiled in the fake news and all of the disinformation that is making people actually go crazy. And you can break away from
That's
that.
exactly
It's very
right.
Yeah, it's very hard. There are so many tentacles. So in a sense, it is self-help. It's a self-help book on how to realize that you are the power. Correct?
Yeah, right. It's the anti-self-help book that is the best self-help you'll ever get, which is get to your story of your life and embrace it.
Excellent. Now, the reason we're doing this interview is because you've been posting some amazing stuff up on your new YouTube channel. And I want all of our subscribers to check out David Martin World. It will be linked below in the description box. He's got 16,000 subs. He just started the channel, so it's quite popular. And I believe your channel's popular because you talk about a broad range of topics that are very topical, meaning it's current events, and you have a very unique perspective. And it's similar to my perspective. Almost all of your talking points are in line with my thinking. And so I want to dive right into the disinformation and the destruction of our culture that's currently going on. Now, about a month ago, one of your YouTube podcasts was discussing the fact that as these governors around the country are shutting down states, a lot of this is unconstitutional, and the destruction of small businesses, the billions of dollars hemorrhaged from the average citizen is criminal. And you broke it down brilliantly.
Correct.
Can you talk to that quickly about the criminality of what's going on?
Absolutely. Your viewers and your listeners need to be aware of a very important thing. Beginning in 1999 and moving to 2003, a very small group of co-conspirators decided to take coronavirus from its naturally occurring presence in the ecosystem and turn it into an opportunistic weapon of terror. Beginning in 1999, a group of researchers funded by the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease, the Center for Disease Control, all under the Department of Health and Human Services, began the process of making coronavirus a terrifying bioweapon. And through a very interesting network of patents that they started filing in 2003, which all of which are illegal, because it is illegal to file patents on nature. That is something that has never been legal. The illegality of it was confirmed in 2013 by the Supreme Court. But this group of individuals, all organized around NIAID and the CDC, not only patented the virus, but also patented the way in which we can measure and detect that virus. And what makes that very important is that over the past 17 years, this small group of co-conspirators have used federal funds and appropriated massive amounts of federal funds to support their own conspiratorial plans to unleash, in their words, a respiratory pathogen of global consequence. This was a collusive act. This was an antitrust violation. This was a criminal conspiracy. And as such, everything that has happened in the United States since the first declaration by the Department of Health and Human Services on January the 31st, where we declared a national state of emergency, and every governor's order that has followed from that is based on a fallacy that cannot be substantiated, and it can't be substantiated because of an illegal patent portfolio held by the CDC and held by NIAID, specifically making it impossible for independent third-party corroboration of a single fact associated with coronavirus or the branded campaign called the disease COVID-19. Remembering that the coronavirus has 5,000 variants that we know about already in nature and in laboratories, the notion that somehow or another there is one more is ludicrous given the fact that even by their own count, coronavirus 2019, or what's called SARS-CoV-2, has 4 primary mutations at inception, which means it's not a virus, it's multiple viruses. And it didn't just start in Wuhan. There were very specific alterations of the virus that were unique to North America and unique to Europe. So the whole premise that says a new disease happened because a new virus happened is 100% falsifiable by their own data. This is a domestic campaign of terror. That's what it is.
Now, I agree with you 100%, but let's be real. What are the odds of an investigation happening and the truth ever coming out?
Actually, quite high. And the reason is because this particular criminal conspiracy is one that has harmed way more people than were first implicated in this campaign. The idea that we were going to terrorize the general population is something that you can kind of get away with because they have in the past. But the problem is they may have overplayed their hand this time. And it turns out that a number of countries around the world who have been directly and economically harmed by this process are realizing that having the World Health Organization and other multilateral agencies playing as the primary mouthpiece for both private foundations and individuals, as well as for nation state actors like the United States and China, places their economies and their businesses and their people at risk. And like the non-aligned movement took down the World Trade Organization in the Doha round, we can see the same non-aligned movement of countries emerge out of this campaign and actually bring the truth to light.
Well, I really hope you're correct on that. Let's talk about some current events that are surrounding what we just discussed. More than a dozen businesses inside CHOP on Seattle's Capitol Hill filed a 56-page class action lawsuit against the city of Seattle. I'm sure you saw that. And
Yes.
I think Barr responded in saying that it probably will not work. The only thing we can do is change the administration. What say you?
Well, the Department of Justice has a very checkered past with the concepts of antitrust, racketeering, and other white-collar crimes. As you know, going back to 2001 and going through the global financial crisis in 2008, going through what happened in 2011 with the realignment of an enormous amount of the capital markets requirements, the Justice Department has an abysmal track record of letting financial racketeering and financial white-collar crimes go unpunished. So the fact that Bill Barr is not taking a leadership role around this particular situation is, I think, twofold. The first being that the Department of Justice doesn't have a robust capacity to go after antitrust law violations. And the second thing is that we don't see a prosecution environment right now where the Justice Department is willing to take on the existing elected structures for a very simple calculus. The notion on the part of the Democrats, without question, is if we can destroy the economy enough, if we can keep people out of work enough, if we can do all of the disturbances enough, then no incumbent president can survive. And that's the calculus on one side. And the calculus on the other side is give Democratic mayors and Democratic governors enough rope and they'll hang themselves. And the fact of the matter is both sides probably have some logic in their argument, but both sides are playing a dangerous game. And the Department of Justice has been on notice about the racketeering and antitrust violations since the 23rd of April, and to date has done nothing. So is there a likelihood that they will take action? I would say the likelihood is low. However, we changed the game by activating the Federal Tort Claims Act. Now, the Federal Tort Claims Act is a little provision in the law very few people are aware of, and every citizen of this country should be aware of. And that is when an agency of the federal government has committed crimes and violated their public duty, there is a provision under the law that says that the public can lay claim to property and life damage that is created by those acts. And through filing Form 95, which is the Federal Tort Claims Act notice provision, every citizen has the right to charge against the Department of Health and Human Services actual claims that must be, under the law, adjudicated within 180 days. So what we're doing is we're actually forcing a legal provision to kick in, which will in fact launch an investigation. And the good news about that is that's a statutory requirement. The little sleepy office of the General Counsel of the Department of Health and Human Services does not get much correspondence. And we have changed that by having thousands of Americans filing Form 95 claims against the Department of Health and Human Services. Because that is a statutory response requirement, the cure for non-response is an immediate legal action, and that is where we think the Justice Department, Congress, and other class claims can emerge.
Yeah, because if we were to calculate the total number of money lost in small business and from just the general citizen, unemployment maybe affects to your medication or lifestyle or anything, the actual number of money that they would be liable for would bankrupt the entire country, let's say. I mean, it would be
No question.
a gigantic figure.
Yes, and at a minimum, just the small business disruption alone is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.7 trillion today based on existing damage that's been done. And if you realize that the likelihood of most small businesses to survive this crisis and come out the other side as employers and as taxpayers is probably going to be harmed somewhere by estimates ranging from 70 to 90%. The fact of the matter is the Department of Health and Human Services conducting an illegal action, a racketeering conspiracy, and a financial fraud on the United States people and its government are in fact liable for this particular illusion which has brought down the country.
Now, David, the general public will say, why in the world would they do that? There is no reason they would do that. You're just a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, well, the cool thing is I actually have been hired by the U.S. government to find criminal conspiracies. I've done that for the United States Treasury. I've done that for the intelligence community. So the cool thing is, get rid of the word theorist, because I actually have been hired by the United States government to find criminal conspiracies. It turns out that this time the U.S. government is the conspirator. But the fact of the matter is, this is not a theory. This is something that was well established. And I will tell you very precisely why it is so critically important to understand the conspiracy that it is. In February of 2020, Dr. Ralph Baric at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Dr. Anthony Fauci at NIAID published an article in which they were quoted as saying that the public resolve to finance research around coronavirus has not been adequate. And because of that, the ability to build a business around coronavirus and coronavirus research is in jeopardy. And the problem was that coronavirus, as a product of nature, resolves itself. They needed to change the narrative so that they could back their Brinks truck up to the back of the Treasury and rob the public blind. They had a financial interest, they had a financial motive, and they controlled the only mechanism of validating the existence of the disease. That's not a theory, that's a criminal conspiracy.
Well, we've exposed similar things going on in the early 2010s. The revolving door of Monsanto, the FDA, the EPA, and the federal government is well known. And it's almost a decade later, and still nothing is done about it. Bayer now owns Monsanto.
Well,
but remember, go ahead.
Yeah, but remember that just this past week, $10 billion of claims against Monsanto on only 200 of the claims. So you're right, it takes a long time. But justice, even if it's slow, still can happen. So I'm not worried about this one. I've played for much longer odds and much longer durations than this. And the fact of the matter is, this is in fact a criminal conspiracy, and that is what needs to be understood by the public so it stops fearing that which is not existent and needs not to be feared.
Well, let's talk about the fear and the propagation of fear by the mainstream media. And what I just put up here is the coronavirus deaths in the U.S., and conveniently, it looks like a paleoclimatological graph. It goes up and down every week by a factor of 100%. And for some reason, every Tuesday of every week, there's a spike. And if we just saw the headlines yesterday about the spike around the country, it conveniently happened Tuesday, Wednesday. This is when the spike occurs on the graph. The overall trend of deaths is down to standard deviation of pneumonia deaths, a few hundred a day in the country. And so how can they scare hundreds of millions of people when this data is right in their face? Why would hundreds of millions of people be afraid of 600 people dying a day? That happens every day. It's not even a scary thing. But now it's scary.
Well, well, mind control is a funny thing. If we go back to 2017, 2018 influenza season, we realized that we had far more deaths and far more hospitalizations that year, and nobody was caring. The way you manipulate people's minds and ultimately manipulate people's fears is to have a constant drumbeat of a scripted message, which has been read across every one of the mainstream media outlets, and then make sure that people are locked in their homes so that the only thing that they can see is what's on a screen. This is a brilliantly constructed scam. Because if all you can do is look at your smartphone or your laptop or your giant screen TV, and the only thing you're being told is be fearful, people are dying, you know what happens over a period of time? You become fearful and people die. Newsflash, that's not news, that's mind control. And if you recite anything long enough, you will have that outcome. The fact is that there has been no proven data. And by the way, Johns Hopkins University is part of this criminal conspiracy because they're manipulating the data. The reason why you have these spikes is because they have a circular reference logic that I talked about several months ago on this show, on my show, where I just said, listen, if you actually go and follow the hyperlinks on Johns Hopkins data site, you find that there are self-referential loops. And when those self-referential loops update, we suddenly have spikes and troughs in the data. There is no outbreak happening. You know, CNN's headline that says that we have an apocalyptic surge in cases is absolute nonsense. That is how you get people to be fearful and live in a state of perpetual immobilization because they're convinced that we actually have this horrific thing happening. When 4,000 people in Texas constitutes a thing that the country should be worried about, or when 1,400 cases in California suddenly is the thing that is defined by the term apocalypse, any logically minded human being can easily see that this is fear pornography being perpetrated by individuals who have an agenda and have no commitment to the facts. There are not coronavirus cases and there are not surges in hospitals. And as much as we were told by Andrew Cuomo that New York was going to run out of ICU beds, the fact of the matter is, at its peak, New York at its worst had a 10% use of their documented ICU beds. 10%. So don't for a moment believe that when the state of Texas says that there are 4,000 people with pneumonia in hospitals, that somehow or another that means there's a run on hospitals. 4,000 hospital beds does not an epidemic or pandemic make. It is fodder for the pornographic obsession with fear that is prevailing the current narrative. And all we have to do is stop watching it.
Yes, excellent advice. Stop watching it. 4,000 people in Texas used to be called a square dance. And according to CNN this morning, it's an apocalypse. It's absolute nonsense.
Right. And the great news is nobody on the fact-finding side of the universe, none of those independent fact checkers that they love to trape out for, you know, this conspiracy or that conspiracy, no fact checker was brought out to pull the plug on Newsweek saying that the day after Trump's rally, there was a spike in infections in Tulsa, Oklahoma. What a freaking lunatic statement to make. There is not a chance that a viral spread could happen within 24 hours. But did Newsweek mind that? No. And it took them 3 days to publish a correction. So this whole thing is a planned exercise. The script for the planning of the exercise was completed on October the 17th, 2019. And the literal script can be read if anybody wants to bother reading it at the Johns Hopkins University site or at the Event 201 site, because the script is laid out, including the script on how to censor material and how to take material down and how to make sure technology is used to control messages. 100% of the script was written and published on October the 17th. So don't tell me that nature obliged by backing itself into a human conspiracy.
My goodness, what an excellent synopsis. It's been a pleasure talking to you for the first time. Check out David Martin and his website, davidmartin.world. The Wobble Effect, putting humanity back into humans. Most importantly, subscribe to his channel because he has a new podcast forum. He does a weekly Butterfly of the Week. Buy his new book, Lizards Eat Butterflies. And could you give our listeners some positive closing thoughts?
No question. The best thing in the universe is the fact that we have nothing to fear. There is no disease that is unusually pathogenic right now that's out to get you. Not only do we have nothing to fear, but when the only way fear can be metastasized and grow like a cancer in our psyche and in our communities is when we listen to those individuals who say, isolate, separate, be apart, and only listen to our approved dogma. You, each and every one of you, just like me, has the ability to stand up and be counted as a human that says that humanity is greater than the fear of death. Take the actions that allow you to disrupt their game plan. Fill out the Form 95s. Work together as communities to establish ways to gather and ways to assemble. Outsmart those individuals who are counting on your consensus and counting on your abject fear. It is on you. Get out, soak up the sun, be part of the solution, and celebrate the fact that humanity is beautiful, life is amazing, and liberty is always worth all of our best efforts every day. It's great to be with you, David. Thanks so much.
Pleasure is all mine, and that certainly was a boom to knowledge, and we hope we can have you back on the show, and we'll be looking for your updates weekly on your YouTube channel. Have a wonderful day.
Very good. Thanks.